Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the second of four webinars we have leading up on our webinar Wednesday series through to Industry Week, and we'll talk about that a little bit later at the end of the presentation. My name is Greg Cantlin. I'm a senior client leader here at Brock Solutions. Look after many of our clients specific around the heavy industry and automotive group. But I've been working with customers in a number of different industries around how they get started on their manufacturing IT journey. And today we'll start to share some of those stories. Just to set the context, we have everyone's mics muted. We will unmute them towards the end of the presentation where we'll have some questions and discussions. This is a half-hour webinar, so we'll try and keep the presentation to about 20-25 minutes. So what we'll see today, we'll go over what we see in the market currently. We'll go around some best practices on how to get started on your manufacturing IT journey. And we'll do that by looking at three different use cases. So we'll bring real life examples of what we've done with our customers across a few different industries. Show some of the lessons learned and use that as a guiding point and see how you relate. Maybe you're in the same situation as some of those other customers. We do have a slide on Brock Solutions, although we likely will not go into that in detail. The focus on this is on telling you how to get started, what we see in the market, but there'll be further information there if you want to know more about us and how to contact us. And then again, question and discussions at the end. So what we see in here is we're out engaging with our clients, engaging with people who are trying to look at MES MOM systems, and what do we do is there's often questions around how do you select a product supplier. There's lots of different MES products out in the marketplace. I think if you look at the MESA organization, there's 700 vendors that are listed out there. What is the role of the product vendor versus a systems integrator? When do you engage one or the other, or how do you engage both of them? A lot of people have spent millions or even into the billions of dollars on their ERP system. And they say, well, I've been told my ERP system can do all this, so why don't I just use that? A lot of people like to get started with just doing a quick prototype on a single machine. Isn't that the best way that we get started? We can prove things out. A lot of times we find these become islands, that it's a start, but it's very hard to move on from there if there's no longer term vision or direction. A lot of people are looking at this and saying, well, who should be engaged? Who owns this overall transformation that's going to happen across our systems and business? Is it someone in IT? Is it operations? Is it supply chain? Is it the engineering staff, maintenance? Who is the one that's going to be the main owner as we move forward? And then a number of customers as well, they may already have what would be an MES system. And they're looking at this saying, well, we've got a lot of these systems already. We're doing a lot of this functionality. If we are going to go down a path of a new direction, how do we go about replacing those systems? They're critical to our business, and we need to be careful what happens to them. We can't stop producing while this is happening. So there's a lot of different questions, different avenues that people are exploring as they're trying to say, how do we start? So just to get you thinking, and as we go through a number of the case studies to try and see where you relate to some of the things we've seen and some of the questions we just had there on what we see in here in the market is, does your organization really understand what manufacturing operations management is? What is the value that it provides? Do you understand how you go about doing this? One of the key things, especially around manufacturing operations management, is there's a big push now into smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, manufacturing intelligence. How does that fit into everything? We have a number of clients that have started to do a MOM MES initiative, only to get down the road and have to stop, regroup, and look at how do we now restart. Other customers are saying, well, we've got our MES implementation, but again, how do we go about upgrading or replacing this? And finally, if you are going to move forward, how do you define the vision for how to roll out that MES implementation? This is something that's critical to your organization, so you need to have that clear vision and direction and guidance on what it is that the system will do, what's the value that it'll bring to your business. So as we look across some of these sample questions, we have one observation: you're not alone. These are common questions that we see every day in the marketplace. And there's one objective we have from this. There is no right answer or silver bullet, but there are learnings and best practices, and we'll use those to help you move forward. So the first case we're going to look at is what was called a framework study. So in this case, we had a large manufacturer looking to replace over 20 years of disparate legacy systems that were across multiple facilities. And just as a side note on this, we've just also gone through this exercise recently with 2 other customers in the metals area. So this is happening all over the place in the industry. You can see on this diagram in the very center, their ERP was SAP. They had a product definition management, and then all the other pieces around it are all the different MES systems and functions. So the color coding shows what may have been quality pieces or material pieces or order management. The multiple layers start to show different sites where these were implemented. So this was a landscape that they were looking at and saying, what do we do with this? They had a senior vice president of operations who came out with a very clear 5-year vision for their manufacturing. As they were looking at this, they were saying manufacturing must be used to drive superior results across all aspects of our business. It can no longer be seen as a black box. And as they were looking at all this, they'd set their vision, they'd had their systems. What do we do now? They reached out to Brock to conduct a 6-week study to answer the question, how do we get started? So over that period, we were engaged with all people from all different areas. And as we were doing that, there'd be a number of questions that were coming up. So again, what software vendor should we partner with? What is that implementation roadmap? What are the benefits and what's the return on investment I'll get by utilizing a new MES? Obsolescence is a very key part, but what else can we get if we take a vision and say, here's what we can do now with new systems that we can't do in our existing? How do we go about incorporating the controls, our new centralized ERP, warehouse management, and LIMS systems into the overall MES space? And as you saw in that spaghetti diagram of all their systems, how do we go about replacing these? Are we going to do this by function, by area within a site, or for an overall site? So over the 6-week period, we addressed a number of different things and information that came across with them. So we looked at what's the criteria you would want to look at for picking a software vendor. What are some of the priorities that you have for your operations, and where do you see quick wins and quick return on investment, and what's the risk in going with those first? So do a risk versus priority analysis. Came up with a conceptual architecture that was to look at something that was a lot more simplified, bring everything into one common MES platform with key pillars of the functionality. Clearly define where are the areas that you'll get a return on investment. So part may be getting rid of obsolete legacy platforms. It might be doing waste tracking. If MES is an enabler to provide SAP with a lot more information, how does it help with that system? How do you streamline your quality and scheduling processes? And then overall, what's the roadmap and how do we go about rolling this out to multiple sites? The second case study we look at was from a whole different standpoint. In this case, it was a manufacturer who was looking to start a greenfield site. They knew there was value in an MES, but they weren't quite clear on what are the exact requirements we need from the MES system versus the other systems we're considering, and who is the vendor that we want to be using for this. They were taking a clean slate and saying, we have a manufacturing IT group, and then we have our operations and business IT. How do they work together? What's the role of each of these groups and all these people? So they came to Brock and said, we need you to help define what goes where and define the functional requirements for what this new MES system will look like. And as we did that, there were a number of questions coming up again. So they're still designing the process. How do you know what should go into MES? What are the key functions that they should include now? As they go and start to roll this out, how do they decide what software vendor? What's the role of the vendor and the system integrator? And what information would they need in order to put forward a bid or a proposal on this solution? What information should we be giving to our OEMs to support the MES? It wasn't only the new MES they're looking, but they're building this new facility. So they recognize we want the control system passing information into MES. We want MES passing information down. So how do we make sure that they know what they need, what should be expected from them to support this? And then finally, as we roll this out as the plant comes online, does MES help support the plant startup? At what point should we make MES come online? So while we looked at this with them, one of the key things we did is the concept of workflows and user requirements. So we started at the bottom level defining what is the physical process, what is it that the plant's going to be doing. And then we looked across swim lanes of the various areas and said, okay, what of these functions should belong in MES? And we defined those functions using use cases, and as well define the touch points into the level 1 controls area, into other level 3 systems that may have been using, such as standalone specialized quality, or up into their ERP. And then on each of these central use cases, you could go in and we would define more information that would be available on the use case. So you could look and say, what's the description of the use case? What triggers this? What are the steps? Are there variations? What are we integrating or interacting with at this step? If this was a case where we needed user interaction, what would a screen look like? So in this case, it was a barcode scanner. So what is a quick, simple screen? So this would, through all these pieces with the screen, the use case, and the workflows, there's a very easy way to work through with the user community and say, what are your business needs? How does your process work? What is it that should be placed within the MES system? The third case that we're going to take a look at is a day in the life. So this was a manufacturer who had multiple sites and products, and they were looking at a broad-based business transformation. Across their production, they had different production needs. They would produce in batch, they would produce discrete items. So it was a lot of disparate requirements from their standpoint on what was needed. They did, however, see MES as a catalyst towards starting to standardize operations and the systems. Again, they had multiple systems. They had a lot of different ways that they would handle production orders, that they were trying to track their inventory, that they would receive and move materials around. So as you went plant to plant, how do you standardize that to have more of a common look and feel? They had been discussing an MES project for over 5 years, but could never get to the point of saying, what is the vision? What is the return on investment that we could get by putting in a new MES system? So they had the idea, but they couldn't get to the point of promoting what the value was. They had a number of alignment issues on what should be in MES and who is it that should own the MES system. So when they started to look at this, they approached Brock again to develop a functional specification that included the return on investment analysis and a vendor day in the life to help them in picking a product vendor that then could provide the functionality needed across all these different sites and production areas. So again, as we started, there's a number of different questions around what is the package? How do we align IT and operations? How do we agree what is a standard function across multiple business units and multiple plants? Where do we go about defining what are the infrastructure requirements? If we're looking at our true return on investment, we're going to have a lot of internal costs to get the infrastructure and the base needs ready for an MES solution. And then how do we go about capturing the benefits and using those to get a commitment on the investment to go forward? So we've been looking at this for 5 years, but now we want to make sure we're ready to move. So as we worked with them and tried to define what needs to happen, we took a look at the life of production across their systems. So they start with the initial plan of what's the production order. It has the bill of materials and recipes. What sort of dashboards do we want? As we start to, and then it transitioned all the way through to the final running the order, closing the order, doing the post-analysis, and what's the infrastructure to support it. So we could look across all of this and say, okay, in running, we need to make sure we got data collection with contextualization. What are the key KPIs that we need to be capturing while we're running? So when we get to the analyze stage, we have the right reports that can allow us to do continuous improvement and do our manufacturing intelligence steps. As we're looking at material, how do we make sure we're getting the right inventory early on, we're doing the right consumption, and then we're looking at what is the process and what is our efficiency as we use different material from different vendors. When working with providing something for the vendors, we take a high level look and say, okay, at an order dispatch state, no matter what type of production we're making, there's a few common steps that need to happen, and what is it that needs to be done within MES, and what needs to maybe go down to the machines. We did workflows as we went through in the previous example. So again, going through and defining what is it that the MES system should be doing, what is it that we need to be going back and forth with ERP and controls, and what is just, how does this relate to the physical flow? What does our system architecture look like from a conceptual layer, and what are sort of the functions sitting within MES? And then finally, here's the return on investment savings analysis. So we can take a look at this and say, what are one-time savings we may get? What are annual savings that we would see? And as we went through this, we would break it down into key categories. We'd look at it for performance. We'd look at it around material management, around interacting with SAP and bill of material definitions. So where do you get all the savings across the business? So through these case studies, we wanted to sort of summarize why these were successful where others may have stalled in the past, or even in the third case study where they couldn't even get going after 5 years looking at this. So a lot of this focused around having the strong upper management vision. They had a vision of what the system should do, and they had leadership engagement to say, this is important, this is a key transformation. They had a respected core team with a cross-section of people. And we'll talk about this in a subsequent slide on what that means for a core team. They looked at clearly defining what goes where. What is it that the MES should do, and what is it that needs to be done in some of the other systems? Before jumping in and starting prototypes or trying to start the project, it took a step back to understand what are the real requirements and how do these help our business goals. So what is it we're going to achieve? Where will we get better from a business standpoint? They looked to use partners and focused on what are best practices, where do we get business value, and how do we implement most effective technology. It wasn't pick a product and then make our process match the product. Again, it was, where's the business value? What system should we be using to get the results we need at the various layers? With using partners, it also helped them get past a number of internal roadblocks. So where they've been studying the problems internally for a number of years, sometimes they only are looking at things from their perspective or their knowledge base, but bringing in a partner that has broader based industry knowledge and experience, it can help bring a different perspective and get them moving forward. And another critical part was all of our activities were time boxed. you can all these items, doing a functional spec or framework study, the more time you have, you will use it. But what ends up happening is you end up over analyzing. So set a reasonable time box, set the time frame, and work within that. So when we mention the core team, the reason we talk around core teams is MES implementations are not silo applications. They need to involve various groups. As MES has evolved over the years, a number of times you would get a point solution, or it would be people in maintenance want to see where are my downtime reasons, or operations may have an initiative on their own to see what's downtime, or supply chain may be trying to look and saying, well, where's our orders? But if you look at MES overall, it involves all these groups. It involves all these different functionalities. So you need to involve people from across your organization. MES itself is a space. It's not a thing. It's not where you go out and say, give me an MES, plug it in, and it works. You need to take a look at the overall MES as a solution. What is the business value? How are you going to implement it? How does it benefit your business? So to help drive that, what you want to do is define a core team who are empowered by leadership and act as your MES champions. So they get a mandate that they are the ones who are going to take that vision and implement it within the organization. You want these people to be forward thinking. This is a big initiative. It's a big transformation. You want to make sure this is driving value in the business. So you have to take a step back and not just do what you have now, but what is it that could be accomplished with this. Because you need to involve various groups, they definitely have to be respected and know the organization overall. So know the politics of the organization, know who to go to get things done or to get the information that's required. The core team should come from various areas as well. So it's not that you define a team of all people from IT or all people from production. So get a cross section. Depending on size of implementation, we've had core teams of 3 people to 6. We have seen larger, but the thing you want to watch again is if you get too large, how do you then control the vision? How do you make sure that you're moving forward and keeping this within a set time frame? And a key thing to realize is the people who are first starting on defining on how things get started versus when you get into implementation don't have to be the same people. Your core team can evolve over time as your transformation project evolves. The core team are the ones who interact with third-party team members, so system integrators, product vendors, maybe teams that are working on the other systems within your organization, such as SAP or controls. And finally, they're the ones to help drive the change management and manage user expectations. People will get very excited on MES as it starts to come in and what it can do. So you need to make sure they understand this is what's going to be provided by the MES. This is our roadmap. This is the timeline of when we expect it to come. So looking at how to get started, it depends on the maturity within your organization, the size of your organization, and where you are at currently today. So through the various case studies we've shown in our industry experience over the past 20 plus years doing these systems, we often see 3 broad underlying drivers. So one is you're faced with a challenge of alignment. You're looking to try and get top to bottom agreement. What is the vision for MES? What is MES overall? And how can we benefit overall? If you're in this standpoint, what we want to say is get started with education. Get to know what is MES and manufacturing operations management, and look at doing a day in the life. Other customers we see have a large obsolescence problem. A lot of existing point custom solution. They need to get them replaced quickly because the business risk is becoming unacceptable. They're having trouble replacing parts. The people who know how to maintain these systems are starting to leave, or the people with all the knowledge on operations are beginning to retire and they don't have those recipes, they don't have the workflows captured in their existing systems. And what they have now are often disparate solutions. So material management may be covered across 5 different applications. So a lot of times with these customers, we get started with a framework study. And the final group we see is they're looking at a manufacturing operations management as a business transformation. They've recognized manufacturing cannot be a black box, and they want to drive value out of the asset. They're often quite mature in what their vision and what they're looking for. So in this case, we say get started with workflows and a complete functional specification. But as we look across all these, there's one common tool that is useful for all pieces, and that was workflows. So that was what we used to define what goes where. A very quick graphical representation showing here's the process, here's how MES will be used. So as we've been going through this, we recommend reaching out to the community and seeing it for yourself. There's a lot of others that have already been going through these transformations. They may be at various stages. They may be just starting like yourself. They may be going through it, or they may be in the more mature stage of having done it, and now they're in more the continuous improvement mindset. So there's a lot of people you can reach out to, from the software providers who are providing the MES platforms, systems integrators such as Brock Solutions, who have worked with a number of customers in different industries and with different software providers and products, and overall MESA International, which is a nonprofit organization comprised of the software providers, system integrators, end users, some people from government associations, who take a look at the overall space in this area and set forth what are best practices, help to drive what is the future vision for this space, such as around enterprise recipe management, smart manufacturing. So they're great areas and avenues to reach out to. And one of the things we want to mention around MESA International, and part of our whole webinar Wednesday series, is this is all leading up to the IndustryWeek event that's happening in Chicago the first week of May. We highly recommend that you go there. There's a lot of great keynote sessions that are happening. The Brock Solutions will be there. One of the key things we want to highlight is within our booth, we'll have Doug Wilhelm, who's retired from RJ Reynolds. He went through and has lived this. So he helped define what is the vision on an MES system. How do we go about defining the business case and value? How do we go about starting the transformation and get this changed within our organization? So as I've been talking through all these different areas, given a lot of different case studies, we'd like to give a little bit of time here for some questions. So we've had a couple pull up in the chat windows, and we'll go through those questions at this time. So the first one we wanted to look at is, if we take a look at the framework study, how long should those take? So you've given different examples across your case studies. How long should we expect for that? So if we take a look, often we say they should take about 6 weeks to three months. A lot of it will depend on, is this a single facility? Is it multiple facilities? Do you have existing systems, or is this looking at it from scratch? What's the level of your maturity and understanding of MES? So we've looked at these with a number of different customers, and again, it's the 6 weeks up to 3 months. And that's something we work out as we start to understand what is your business and what is it you're trying to achieve. The other question that came in is, it was actually a question that also had come up on the last webinar, is here often is, how do you go about building an ROI for MES? So as we go through and look at this, we've had experience working with a number of customers over a number of industries, And as we do that, we've come to understand and focus on what is your business and what do you hope to achieve with an MES system, and seeing what others have been able to achieve. So as we go through and do the workflows, defining what goes where, we'll start to take a look at things. And for example, material inventory. If we have a customer that has their inventory across 5 different systems, now it's in one central location. You're able to track exactly where your work in progress is. What do you have for raw materials? What's the timing on the finished goods? Now you got a lot better visibility on your overall inventory situation. So does that allow you to reduce the inventory on hand? Does that allow you to reduce how many raw materials you're covering? If you have better visibility into your production orders, how does that help? So we take a look at that, and that's one example. We may take a look and say, if you're able to start to get better downtime analysis and reduce the amount of downtime by 3%, translating that into good production uptime, what does that translate into for business value for you? So we work through a number of these studies, and I think a key thing is we make sure that our customers are the ones who understand and own the benefits. They own the numbers that are coming through, because that's a critical part of change management. Now they're vested, now they believe in what has been put forward and help to achieve that. So I think we're coming towards the end of the time we have, so we're going to wrap it up for today. But we hope to see everyone next Wednesday on our 3rd of the 4 webinars, and first week of May while we're at Industry Week. Thank you.